Oh, hi. So it was about a year ago when my grandma passed away. Oh, and yeah, this is going to be another downer of a video. I don't think I've ever smiled once during one of your videos. Well, okay, ouch, self-esteem. My grandma was special in my life. She's the only grandparent I ever really had a relationship with. Both of my dad's parents had passed away by the time I was 5. My other grandfather passed away when I was in grade 1. So while I have small snippets of memories of them, mostly they've faded away. And I worry the same thing is happening now. What I mean is that my other grandparents are ideas. We have photographs of them, my parents speak of them, but they remain intangible to me. It's like when you're in history class and you're told about presidents or prime ministers from the 1800s or early 1900s. They're important. I can read about them, see the pictures, and try to understand the political cartoons criticizing them. But when it comes down to it, I still have this barrier between me and them. And I think it comes down to all the other senses we use when we interact with people. Flipping through photographs can jog our memories into remembering forgotten picnics or birthdays. But according to research, smell, taste, and touch are much more closely related to storing memories. And each of those is slipping away. I think I can remember my grandma's touch. It wasn't that she had rough hands, but I could also tell that she had to work growing up, that she wasn't afraid to get into the muck of things. I loved her baking, which she mostly kneaded by hand. She had a garden that she would tend in the summer, and she was really into sports. Apparently, she was ready to go to the Commonwealth Games, but when World War II began, it kind of wrecked things for a while. But she came first in the senior games, so there's that. The taste is her baking again. I love going to visit because I knew I'd get fed, whether it was her own doing or these packaged oatmeal cookies that only she had when I was growing up. But it was tea that most closely brings me back to her. The only time I drank tea as a kid was at her house. I'd make sure to put some sugar and a bit of milk in, and then played cribbage with her. I never won once. But that tea, man, that's Grandma's house. When I get my Earl Grey tea latte from Starbucks, that first sip is when I see that face flash before mine for just a second until it evaporates away and gets replaced by the stresses and traffic of everyday life. It's the smell, though, that I most keenly remember, and this I'm not going to be able to put into words. My grandma's house had a particular smell that has never been replicated anywhere else I've ever been. Maybe it's just because everyone has a unique smell, which I'm sure is partly what it is, but it was a mixture of that and nature because she lived out in the country for most of her life, and old cigarette smoke and forgotten perfumes and other flotsam and jetsam of 60 years of living in the same place. If I could bottle that smell, though, I would. Impossible, of course, but I would. I'm thinking of this right now because in the final years of her life, my grandma didn't necessarily remember me. That was the hardest part of her final years. I certainly didn't make it back as often as I wanted or should have, and most of that is because of fear on my part. The few times that I did, because of the dementia or Alzheimer's or whatever it was that doctors had decided to call it that week, she would slip between asking me questions about what I was doing and asking me who I was and what I was doing there. And that hurt. It stung. This woman who had watched me grow up, who loved me unconditionally, and who in many ways I aspired to be like, couldn't remember who I was. Intellectually, I know it was the disease, but that doesn't really make it easier. So conveniently, I chose to not really remember those last few years. Instead, I focused on the good times. I remember the cookies and the tea, her holding my hand, and the smell of that house. But even those things are slipping away. And I'm wondering, is that normal? Is it normal, or maybe a better question to ask is it right to forget your family? I've been obsessed over Media Lab, the business I'm trying to make successful. That's been my focus for the last 3 years, planning it, executing it, and then trying to sustain it. In that time, everything else has become secondary. I don't reach out to friends that often. My parents have to phone me. I forget to reply to texts for weeks. I become kind of awful. But then, after I sip that latte, I'm taken back to being 7, trying to count my hand in a game of cribbage, being skunked by my 68-year-old grandmother, and that tear starts to form in my eye. Sure, I have pictures. I have a bunch of pictures, and I can look through them, and I can try to remember what was going on when they were taken. But it's not the same. Time marches on. That's the cliche of it all. I understand that in 100 years, I'll be dead. I'll be mostly dust, and possibly my nephew and niece will think of me occasionally as they try to outrun the robot uprising led by clones of Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk. Which, to be fair, will turn out to be great for shareholders. What I'm trying to say is I think it's important to take some time and think about and talk about those people who came before us. Not for future generations, but for you. Just like those old white dudes running countries that I learned about in school who I have no emotional connection to, I doubt you have any sentimental tie to my grandma. But by telling the stories and celebrating that life, you can keep them close to you, even as some of the senses you're sure you'll remember forever are lost. But what do you think? Which senses are the most important to you? Will you still need me? Will you still feed me when I'm 64? Let me know down in the comments below. Next week, let's get high on life. I'll see you next Thursday.